the First Baptist Church of Sutherland Springs.
But God, as we have gathered in this place, may you be able to look down from heaven and say, those are my children choosing to gather together in my name and worship me.
1 week before their world would turn upside down.
And at times when you think it's hardest to praise God, that's when it's most important to praise God.
The small congregation sharing hugs and smiles.
I could sit and say, oh, poor me, or I could just say, but in the long run, one day I'm going to sit around the table with my God, and I'm going to say, thank you, Jesus.
No sign of the tragedy that would strike the faithful.
Our country was attacked. Our state was attacked. Our church was attacked. Glory to God, our people were attacked.
This is us after Sutherland Springs.
This is a KSAT 12 special report after Sutherland Springs.
Messages of love. We love you, Mom and Richard. Always remembered. Guardian angel, rest in peace. Good evening, I'm Steve Spriester. It has been 66 days since 26 people, half of them children, were gunned down inside a church here in Sutherland Springs. You can see the crosses and the memorials are still here. Tonight, though, we're going to take a look at how these things happen, but we also want to learn what is the lesson in all of this. What did we learn from Sutherland Springs? How do we protect ourselves in an emergency? How do we continue to have hope? Our focus is mostly on the victims, survivors, and first responders on the scene, but the gunman is part of the puzzle, though our aim is certainly not to glorify what he did. To get to those questions, we have to begin on the morning of November 5th.
All of a sudden I hear like firecrackers popping. Ta 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 ta. Everybody get down, they're shooting at us. Everybody started screaming, yelling. Everybody got down, crawling under, wherever they could hide. It was so scary, and that man was shooting. He was shooting hard. I thought it was the police when I saw the feed, because everybody got real quiet. And be quiet, everybody was saying, be quiet. That's it, that's it.
The babies would cry, and when the babies would cry on the bottom, he would go in.
She had looked at the gunman in the eye, and he fired at her, and it knocked her glasses off her face. Not a scratch on her, thank God. She said her mom covered Rylan and Brooke and Emily with her body. What's on top of them. So when we heard that, we pretty well figured Ryan's got five gunshot wounds. Emily didn't make it, which means a lot of the bullets had to go through Joanne.
Where you want us to go? In front of the church. In front of the church.
I turned on my e-dispatch on my phone to listen to the page out and realized that it was the church in Sutherland Springs, and my heart immediately sank.
Something we all say does not happen in small communities. Well, we found out today it does.
It was a hectic and horrific morning. A man who lives 1 block away from the church actually heard the shooting. When he saw the gunman leave, he grabbed his own gun and started shooting.
People at that church, they're friends of mine, their family. And every time I heard a shot, I knew that probably represented a life. I was scared to death. I was. I was scared for me, and I was scared for every one of them. And I was scared for my own family that just lived less than a block away. I'm no hero. I am not. I think my God, my Lord, protected me and gave me the skills to do what needed to be done. And I just wish I could have gotten there faster.
When the gunman left, Stephen Williford's effort to catch him didn't end.
The gentleman with the rifle came to my truck as the shooter took off, and he briefed me quickly on what had just happened and said that we had to get him, and so that's what I did. I was on the phone with dispatch the entire time. I gave them the direction we were going, on what road and everything, and that, the vehicle was in sight, and I was picking up, getting closer and closer to him. We hit about 95 going down 539 trying to catch this guy until he eventually lost control on his own and went off in the ditch. The gentleman that was with me got out rested his rifle on my hood and kept it aimed at him, telling him to get out, get out. There was no movement. There's none of that.
These 26 crosses serve as a stark reminder of the people that were lost that morning. We're going to talk a little bit now about the man who killed them. In the 2 months since the Sutherland Springs massacre, blame has repeatedly shifted on how Devin Patrick Kelly was able to legally obtain the firearms used in the shooting. He had a previous military conviction of domestic abuse, and on his firearm purchase form, he used an out-of-state address.
Since the military has no defined charge under the Uniform Code of Military Justice for domestic violence, convictions in military courts have gone unreported.
I want to say, as somebody who probably owns a lot more firearms than most of my colleagues on either side of the aisle, that this is exactly the kind of individual who should have never passed a background check.
Our Dylan Collier on what went wrong and how this gunman was able to slip through the cracks.
We're only 48 hours into this investigation.
Before the 26 people shot and killed inside the First Baptist Church of Sutherland Springs had even been identified, investigators had already conceded that Devin Patrick Kelly should not have been able to buy the weapons used in the mass killing. Kelly's 2012 military conviction for domestic violence never entered by the Air Force into an FBI criminal database. His stay at a New Mexico mental hospital also apparently not detected while going through background checks. Federal law prohibits 9 groups of people from possessing guns. Kelly's history put him in 4 of those categories.
If we receive information that somebody is illegally in possession of a firearm because they are a prohibited person, then we would go make contact with that individual through further investigative efforts and attempt to take that firearm away.
Something ATF agents never got the chance to do with Kelly. A lawsuit filed last month in Bexar County by the family of several victims also contends that Kelly used a Colorado address to buy the assault rifle used in the shooting. The out-of-state address, according to the suit, should have kept Kelly from transporting the gun to his residence. The firearm instead should have been sent to Colorado. But as we now know, Kelly walked out of a San Antonio Academy store with it. Last month, the Air Force announced that it has changed the way it reports criminal convictions of service members to the FBI. The military branch has already been named in a wrongful death lawsuit filed by the Holcomb family, which lost 9 family members in the Sutherland Springs shooting. Dylan Collier, KSAT 12 News.
Reminders of what happened here in Sutherland Springs are really everywhere. This is a small billboard. If you look closer, though, you see toys and stuffed animals left for the children that were killed here. You know, Devin Patrick Kelly was certainly not the first U.S. mass shooter to get guns through the background check system. Some were even obtained by people who were being treated for mental health problems, and some bought their guns legally. But as our Patty Santos shows us, one of the persons who bought their guns legally actually opened fire on a crowd 1 month before the shooting in Sutherland Springs.
October 1st in Las Vegas, a crowd at a country music festival under fire by a man from the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Hotel. 58 people died, nearly 500 were hurt. The gunman legally obtained a dozen semi-automatic rifles modified with bump stocks, which allowed him to fire repeatedly without pulling the trigger over and over. Federal law also does not require licensed gun dealers to alert the government about rifle purchases. The shooter had a total of 49 guns, some at his home, all bought between October 2016 and September 2017. The gradual purchases did not get the attention of law enforcement because the gunman passed all background checks. The man who opened fire on people inside Orlando's Pulse nightclub in June 2016 also legally obtained an AR-15 style rifle and handgun. 49 people died, 53 were hurt. The gunman passed a background check and bought them about a week before the attack from a licensed dealer in Florida. He also had 2 security licenses. One of them allowed him to be armed on duty. The gunman was known to the FBI, which investigated him in 2013 and 2014 after he made comments to co-workers that had them concerned he might have ties to terrorist groups. There were no criminal charges, But even if the gunman had been placed on a terrorism watch list, that would not have prevented the man from being able to buy guns. Congress rejected legislation to change that in 2015. December 2nd, 2015, San Bernardino, California. 14 killed, 22 hurt in a shooting inside a facility for people with developmental disabilities. The gunman and his wife were armed with 2 rifles and 2 handguns. Some of the guns were bought illegally by someone else. That person told the FBI he was asked to buy them to draw less attention from law enforcement. The buyer pleaded guilty and received a 25-year sentence. 9 people died in a community college classroom in Roseburg, Oregon on October 1st, 2015. The gunman used several handguns and a rifle legally bought by himself and family members. 7 people were hurt in that shooting. Charleston, South Carolina. The evening of June 17, 2015, a gunman armed with a pistol killed 9 people attending a prayer service inside a church. The gunman had a previous drug arrest, which should have kept him from buying the weapon. The FBI later said a background check examiner did not see the arrest report because the wrong agency was listed in state criminal history records. Because that check took longer than 3 days, the gun shop owner was legally allowed to sell the gun. That gunman was convicted and sentenced to death in 2017. September 16, 2013, at the Washington Navy Yard, a former Navy reservist turned civilian contractor armed with a shotgun killed a security officer, took the officer's handgun, and used it when he ran out of shotgun shells. 12 people died, 7 were hurt, including 2 police officers. The gunman was twice accused of firing a gun in anger, but was never prosecuted. He was given an honorable discharge from the military, which helped him get security clearance to access the yard. And in the month before the shooting, the gunman went to Veteran Affairs hospitals twice to get treatment for insomnia. He was not committed, so he was legally able to buy the shotgun used in the killings. December 2012, Sandy Hook Elementary School, 20 students and 6 adults killed, 2 adults hurt. The gunman killed his mother, took her rifle and 2 handguns and ammunition she had bought. Newtown police had a report from 4 years earlier that the gunman said he had an assault weapon and planned to kill the children at the school and his mother. But police then said there was nothing they could do about it because the gunman's mother owned the guns. Moviegoers in an Aurora, Colorado theater attacked July 20, 2012. The gunman released tear gas canisters, then fired from a rifle, shotgun, and handgun. 12 people died, 58 were hurt. The gunman was undergoing psychiatric treatment, passed required federal background checks, and legally bought the guns he used.
The treatment wasn't the issue, but if the shooter had been legally declared a mental defective or had been committed to a mental institution, that would have prevented him from being able to buy the guns legally. Patty Santos, KSAT 12 News.
Behind the doors of what was the sanctuary here at First Baptist Church, it's been transformed into a memorial for the victims, for the survivors, really for this entire community. In talking to local law enforcement, they tell me incidents like this they prepare for, but they hope to never encounter. As a matter of fact, a veteran local FBI agent tells me Sutherland Springs is the worst scene he's ever been to.
I think any first responder, when you first pull up, you're trying to take care of the chaos, to control the chaos and to try to bring order to that chaos.
Agents from the local office of the FBI among those on the scene in Sutherland Springs. They tell me how that tragedy has changed them. It's the first time they've spoken to the media about it. You're going to hear from them in just a moment. But as we go forward with this KSAT 12 News special, we want you to hear some words of encouragement from First Baptist pastor Frank Pomeroy.
The media, from what I understand, is amazed that we are not angry, that we are not going out and calling for this and calling for that. Folks, we have the freedom to choose, and rather than choose darkness, as the one young man did that day, I say we choose life. And by choosing life, amen. By choosing life, We have life and shall give life and shall share life, and the life is Jesus Christ. Amen.
I'm a firefighter.
A teacher.
I'm a farmer.
A manager.
I'm a barber.
A waitress. A student. A mom. We're all part of your community. We live in small towns and big cities.
On farmland and concrete.
Every day we move in and out of each other's busy lives.
It's easy to take for granted all the little details that make up our everyday.
The morning walk.
That familiar engine firing up.
The bus stop friends. A hot cup of coffee.
That guy who can never seem to parallel park.
Every day brings surprises.
A flat tire. Midday traffic.
Bus delays. Again. There's always something unexpected.
And honestly, that's fine.
It's when you experience a moment of uncertainty.
Something you know shouldn't be there.
Or someone's behavior that doesn't seem quite right.
These are the moments to take a pause.
Because if something doesn't feel right, it's probably not. It's not about paranoia.
Or being afraid.
It's about standing up and protecting our communities.
One detail at a time.
Because a lot of little details can become a pattern.
We
trust our instincts.
Just like you should.
Because only you know what's not supposed to be in your everyday.
We all play a role in keeping our communities safe.
So protect your everyday. If you see something suspicious, say something to local authorities.
There may be days where you find yourself experiencing joy, and then the next day you may find yourself very, very depressed. And to know that that's all normal and that there's no one right way to grieve.
Healing words in Sutherland Springs in the days after the shooting. A Veterans Affairs mobile clinic, which helps members of the military cope with stress and trauma, showed up to help the community cope with the tragedy. We see them in uniform, behind a badge, on the front lines, trying to bring calm to chaos. But rarely do they publicly talk about what it's like to see evil up close. Tonight, 3 members of the local FBI office do just that, in part to give us a glimpse of what they go through as people, but also to hopefully break a stigma that is hurting first responders. All of that came to the surface on that Sunday in Sutherland Springs.
Good morning, I'm Christopher Combs. I'm the FBI Special Agent in charge. First of all, our condolences to this community on this horrific act.
You know, my 22 years of being in crisis response for the FBI, that's probably the worst scene I've ever seen.
It's just hard to see that type of stuff. Again, it's not natural for people to experience that.
I don't know how anyone would not have been affected by Sutherland Springs. It was a terrible, terrible thing that happened.
The roles they play in the FBI are different, but responding to a church in small-town Texas would link them together. A bond forged in what looked like a battlefield.
Pulling up right away, I kind of knew to some extent of the horror that we'd see. And I usually take a breath and say, okay, before we get out of the car, you know, what are we going to do? Let's just take 10 seconds, just think about this, because once you get out, you step into that chaos, that hurricane.
Special Agent in Charge Christopher Combs would be in Sutherland Springs for days after the shooting, walking the scene, and daily briefings were part of his first responder duties. His fellow agents assisting in the search for evidence, the documenting of what was found, and the removal of 26 bodies. Was it hard for you personally?
It was. I'll be honest with you, it was very hard for me. It's been hard on my troops that were there. We worked hand in hand with the Texas Rangers to process that crime scene. And you know, there are people that are struggling, and I think they're going to continue to struggle for a long time.
Out of that concern for his fellow first responders is part of the reason Combs is talking. His fear is that not enough first responders are actually talking about what they've gone through. The stigma of the tough cop who doesn't need help. This FBI special agent, who was at the Pentagon on 9/11 and 2 other active shooter incidents before Sutherland Springs, worries that first responders are struggling in silence rather than talking about what they've seen and the PTSD they are undoubtedly dealing with.
We're all just human beings. And I think what happens to a lot of people is that builds over time, and you have to deal with it. And I think all of us in the first responder community, just like we go for physical checkups, there's got to be a mental checkup.
And that's exactly the door the FBI has opened. This truck is just ready to go at a moment.
It is. It's ready to go at a moment's notice.
So this is the truck that you took to Sutherland Springs?
It is. It is a truck that we took there.
Special Agent Hector Morales, part of the FBI's evidence response team. This truck, almost like a mobile crime lab.
We have tarps and canopies. We have some body bags down here that sadly we sometimes need to have.
Body bags are what Hector and his team helped carry out of the church.
In the case of Sutherland Springs, I insisted on rotating my people who were dealing with some of the aftermath of that scene on an hourly basis.
He quickly realized this was evidence gathering in a horrific backdrop. Doing your job, but also realizing many of the body bags they were carrying out were much smaller than they were used to.
And every human life that is murdered or is the victim of violence affects you. But sometimes when it's children, it affects you even more. And I don't mean to diminish adult victims or anything like that, but it's just hard to see that type of stuff. Again, it's not natural for people to experience that.
Morales is a former Marine who holds a Christian ministry degree. So it may not be a surprise he deals with incidents like Sutherland Springs by leaning on faith, family, and more the FBI.
We know that when they come back, we need to take care of them. And so we go on the ground with them, we go through it with them, and when they come back, we have something set up to help them process what they've experienced.
The San Antonio FBI office also includes Brownsville, McAllen, Laredo, Austin, Del Rio, and Waco. Hundreds of employees that Jaron Carter is the nurse for. She's also the hidden part of what's called the Critical Incident Response Team, and that's by design. She arrived at Sutherland Springs hours after the initial call. Her role, to help with agents' physical and mental health.
We may pass out water, we may pass out snacks, but it's just to provide sort of a ministry of presence. It gives me a better appreciation of what they're exposed to, what has impacted them, so that when they're not operational again, I can say, I was there, they saw me there, and I know what you experienced. I experienced it too.
An experience and a bond these first responders are still working through, as well as looking for the lesson in a community's pain.
What do you think the lesson is after Sutherland Springs?
Well, I've thought about that, and what I try to focus on is the positive aspect of that. I think the lesson is that in everything bad, and this certainly was the most awful thing I could have ever experienced myself, is that there is some good that comes out of it. I saw this community come together. I saw even my colleagues band together to help one another.
There was a lot of goodwill that was evident after this horrific crime scene. And that gives me hope, right? Because you see evil, we're dealing with the evil, but then there's also goodness that comes out of scenes like this.
If it happened there, it can happen anywhere. And I don't say that to scare people. I say that because people need to be prepared. Whether you're in a church or a movie theater or you're in a restaurant, you should still go. You got to live your lives and don't let the bad guys win. But you should think about where are the exits. If something goes wrong, how am I getting out? What am I going to do with my family? And that alone could make the difference of you being a victim or being a survivor.
It was Sunday afternoon before I actually got to the scene, and I was actually standing not far from where these crosses are now standing. One of the first people I saw was Special Agent in Charge Christopher Combs. And during that interview, I talked to him about just how still and somber this scene was, even though there were hundreds of people that were descending on this little town. It almost seemed as if that calm, that stillness, was out of respect for those who were lost. It's an assignment that affects both of us to this day.
Don't wait for the emergency to happen for you to start thinking. Think beforehand, okay, what I'm gonna do, okay, something happened.
They know the worst can happen, but a Seguin church learning firsthand how to respond in an emergency.
It seems like every time you wake up every morning there's some catastrophe going on somewhere, and so our children look at that. And I've got a 15-year-old and a 17-year-old, and they have concerns, and a lot of times doing this job they hear about my concerns as far as protecting the city and protecting our firefighters, and so they see it firsthand. They seen pictures from Orlando. I went to Pulse nightclub and afterwards and saw the tragedy there, and so when I have those discussions with them, I always tell them, if you hear something, don't wait to try to figure out what it is. If you hear a noise, if you hear something that sounds like gunfire, then you need to leave that area immediately. I always try to tell them to make sure that their phones are charged, and so with kids, they're always Snapchatting, and so their phones are always low, and so when they go places, I always make sure that they stay together, that they have a phone charge, that they understand how to get in and out. It's crazy, if I go to a restaurant, I always sit with my facing the door. I never sit with my back to the door. I try to tell them things like that to make sure that they understand that there's another way out to be able to get out. And so it's scary that you have to remind people to do those things. It's scary that you have to talk about tourniquets to your loved ones and tourniquets to the citizens of this community, to where we need to have tourniquets handy in case someone is involved in a mass shooting incident. So it's a new normal for us. I think people in other countries, say perhaps Israel, places like that, where they have generations of people that have grown up in a war-torn environment. It's kind of what we're doing now, and it's really, really sad, but it is a new normal and a sign of the times that we live in. I understand that the fear is real, but we're dealing with evil. We're dealing with evil people with evil intentions, and if we don't go out and live our lives and enjoy ourselves, and we're letting that evil win, the chances of anything happening to you are probably very remote. But again, I know that people are scared to go out some places, especially the public events, and I would say to them that they need to continue to go and enjoy themselves, because they can't let what's going on in the world change their behaviors and change the good about living in this country and the good about living in this community, that you have to continue to go out and enjoy. Our children are watching us, and if we sit at home and bind ourselves to that safety net that we call home, we're not going to really live our lives. We're not going to enjoy the freedoms that we have. So I would tell people to continue to go and enjoy. We have amazing public services here. Our citizens are protected. Our citizens are safe. But they need to be vigilant when they do go out, but they need to continue to go and enjoy themselves and take advantage of the things that are out there to see and do. Being a first responder, I think there's a lot of times where, and especially being the fire chief of a city like this, there's a lot of things that keep you up at night. And so it used to be 25, 30 years ago, you would worry about fires, or you'd worry about floods or catastrophes coming, but now it is worrying about an Orlando situation here, a Paris, France situation. And so it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time as far as being the fire chief here, making sure that we have things in place for that. And when I'm off, when I'm just Charles at the mall or at the movies, when I go to the movies, I'm looking for 2 ways in. When I go to the mall, if I'm with my kids, I try to stay with them. I used to let them just run off. We try to stay together, or at least know where we are. The whole communication thing, it's like the phone, making sure you remember where you parked. If something happens, you go back to the vehicle. You wait for us right there until we're all together. So those are some of the things that that I have to do. You have to remain vigilant. And so you go to the store, you're aware of your surroundings, you're looking around to see if anything is abnormal. I think because of what I do, I'm probably hypersensitive or hypervigilant to that. But I think it's something that each and every one of us have to do. We just talked about going out, being out in the public, doing the things that you want to do, but you have to have your head on a swivel, not to the point of where you're looking to be attacked or you're looking for something bad to happen, but you're just aware of where you are, you're aware of the people you're around, and if something does not feel right, then chances are it's probably not, and you need to alert someone or you need to leave that area. But again, when I'm out in the public, I enjoy being around people, and I'm not going to let evil prevent me from doing that, but I have to be vigilant and aware of my surroundings.
Tourniquets save lives. The Stop the Bleed program teaches people how to help in a crisis.
Now, tighten this.
After the shooting in Sutherland Springs, the local J.B. Goodwin Realtor's office learned from these experts at UT Health San Antonio. Now they know what to do to stop bleeding in the arms or legs.
You always want to go above the injury, right? So depending on where it's at, what he wants you to do is tighten this down as tight as you can, but this is the little bar. And we want to see how tight it is on you. It's pretty hard to turn. Then this will go back through so we have it all straight. And there we go.
The Stop the Bleed sessions provided monthly at University Hospital.
With what transpired in Sutherland Springs, it's time that we step up.
Life-changing church in Seguin, less than 30 miles away from Sutherland Springs. But what happened in that small town? A stark reminder that it can and has happened anywhere. The Seguin Church, similar in size and layout to First Baptist, and some of its members recently gathered to learn how they can defend themselves in a session provided by the Bexar County Sheriff's Office.
Active shooters when we have somebody in a confined space trying to do harm.
Teaching schools, churches, organizations about how to protect themselves in case of a violent event.
The term started as active shooter because of a handgun. Now includes all different type of weapons. You may or may not be related to the location. It could be a disgruntled employee, or it could be a jealous husband, or it could be somebody that just decided randomly to select your location.
The person that's going to be committing this mass murder, because that's what an active shooter is mass murder. It's somebody coming in with a mentality of I've been done wrong, so I'm going to take revenge on all of you. You owe me.
You have to think about it. What if? And I'm not telling you to live in fear. What I'm asking you is to live prepared. The deliberation stage is when you actually have to do something about it. This is the moment that you're going to take action. Am I going to leave the premises to save my life? And if I cannot avoid that's leaving, am I going to defend this area? Can I lock the door? Can I barricade? Can I deny access to the bad guy to where I'm at so I can save lives? And here, I'm making myself small. Or I can use my belt, and I can do the same. Some doors have a way to get them closed. Tie them here. What if the door opens inside? If they open inside, I block the door with my feet, so there's no access. If you're going to defend, if there's somebody coming in shooting right now, imagine I don't have a gun. I will run towards the person. Am I going to get shot? Absolutely. And it's going to stink. But by doing that, maybe we can overpower the shooter and save the rest.
So there's no way to talk to an active shooter. The only way to stop an active shooter is to take that active shooter down by meaning of overpowering the person, taking the weapon away.
I shot the bad guy. I'm going to make sure that I can see the door. I see the bad guy. I'm going to take a knee, and I'm going to put my gun down. I'm going to put my gun down. And I'm going to keep it close enough that if I need to go back to my gun, I can get it. But when that door opens and the first cop is coming in, I'm going to just show my hands open, and he's going to scream at me, "Get down." You know what I'm going to do? Get down. And get ready to be handcuffed. It's going to happen, because if I see a gun, I'm going to handcuff you until we figure out who's the good guy, who's the bad guy. Don't wait for the emergency to happen for you to start thinking. think beforehand, okay, what I'm going to do, okay, something happened, boom. And like I said, it's not to live in fear, it's to live prepared.
If that can happen in Sutherland Springs, in a sacred ground, then it can happen any place. And we need to do our part to be vigilant to make sure that our children, our grandchildren are safe.
Sometimes you see the person throw whatever they have in their hands and run the other way.
The Bexar County Sheriff's Office provides that training for free. To schedule a session, you can call a Community Readiness and Intelligence Division. That number on your screen right now, 210-335-6169. See something, say something. We take a look at when you should be suspicious of people or activity and how you should say something, coming up in just a few minutes.
Wounds come. In the text this morning, God is announcing victory. He is saying that we are going to have victory, but he is also announcing the victor will be wounded. We can't allow this act that happened last weekend to keep us from church. We can't allow it to use it as an excuse why we can't or should not go to church. We can't allow that act to let us turn heinous and ugly as the darkness would have us to be. The victors, to be victors, which I have read the end of the book, we are, means you have to get in a fight. And if you get in a fight, even if you're the biggest, burliest one in the fight, you're still going to get hurt somewhere. If you're not, then you wasn't fighting.
Well, granted, my kids are a little more jaded than most. I mean, they're law enforcement kids, so they're a little more well prepared for these sort of things than most kids. I'd like to think anyway. We go over this, but what I do tell my kids and what I encourage other parents to tell their kids is, look, there is evil in this world. There are people that walk among us that are not of this world. Something else, something different makes these people tick. They will hurt you. They will kill you. They will kill you because of who you are or what you represent or what you're wearing, or maybe nothing to do with you. Maybe they're mad at somebody else altogether and you just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. So kids need to hear that sort of thing. They don't need to be completely terrified of living in the outside world, but they need to know that evil does exist and it does walk among us. You know, so after spending the better part of 25 years in law enforcement, just when you think you've seen it all, something happens that rocks your world and shows you a whole other side of humanity that you never knew existed. And I'll tell you, November 5th of this year, that happened. It was another Sunday. It was I went to church with my family. I was in uniform at the time. We left church, and my wife gets on Facebook as we're driving to HEB, and she says, "Hey, you got a mass shooter situation happening right now." And at the time, I thought, okay, well, maybe it's in my county, maybe it's not, but I'm heading that way. To be honest with you, I didn't know exactly where Sutherland Springs was, but I knew the general direction, so I started driving that way. Found out it was in Wilson County. I had just met Sheriff Tackett 2 days before at a networking event that I hosted for area sheriffs, and I was on the way. So, you know, it rocked my world, but at the same time, I knew what I needed to do. I knew what my place was, and it was in Sutherland Springs next to Sheriff Tackett. So as weird or tragic as it may sound, the fact that we even have to have this conversation, my family knows that when we go to a restaurant, Dad sits at a certain kind of table. He sits at a certain chair at that table. He faces the door. We also know as wife and kids that if Dad says run that direction and go and get out of here, we're going. We're not going to ask any questions. We're not going to stop to pick up our belongings. We're gone. And so, you know, that is it's a weird situation to have to prepare for. But my wife and kids know if we're in church, if we're at McDonald's, if we're at HEB, and I point to a door and I say, run, go, get out of here, they're going to go. And Dad's going to stick around and do what needs to be done because at the end of the day, he is a cop. But I guess I'm not just your normal everyday dad. We got to go about our normal everyday life. Look, there are people that are terrorists that hate our way of life. They envy our way of life. They want to end our way of life. And if we stop living our normal lives, if we stop doing the things that bring us joy, we stop going to church or doing things with our kids that are our way of life, they're our right to live like that. If we stop doing those things, then the bad people win, the evil wins, the terrorists win, and I'm not about to let that happen. My family is not about to let that happen.
Throughout this hour, you've heard about the See Something, Say Something campaign. But what exactly is something? Well, that's up to you to determine. No one knows your environment better than you. You know who belongs and who doesn't. Now, if you aren't sure what suspicious activity is, consider these examples. An unfamiliar car parked in a spot you see regularly. You might see a package or luggage that is unattended. A window or door that is normally closed may be open. And if someone asks questions about the specifics of a building, its purpose, operation, security procedures, and personnel, including shift changes. Is someone paying a lot of attention to places or buildings beyond casual interest? He or she might be hanging around without any explanation. There could also be unusual, repeated, or prolonged observation of a building, and they might be using binoculars or cameras. There could be note-taking or measuring. Another suspicious sign, if that person is counting spaces around the site. And red flags should go up if you spot someone sketching floor plans. Some of those activities could be innocent, but law enforcement wants you to let them know so that they can decide. Now, here's what to make note of before you make that report. Who or what you saw, when you saw it, where it happened, and why it's suspicious. How do you report it? You can report it online at tips.fbi.gov. There's an online form, and while it does ask for your personal information, you do not have to provide those details. The FBI says it will take anonymous tips, but if you do provide some contact information, it will help them ask some follow-up questions. You can also submit an anonymous tip to the San Antonio Police Department using their Tip 411 program. If you go to sanantonio.gov/SAPD, click on Tip 411, it will take you to an online form. You can even upload files and photos to send with your tip. This form does not ask for your contact information. To send a tip straight from your phone, text the number 847411 and use the keyword SATIP. Then share the information you have. And if there's an emergency, don't hesitate to call 911. So just like law enforcement officials have explained tonight, be aware of your surroundings. If something doesn't feel right, don't stick around. If you fear something bad might happen, report it. Bill Barajas, KSAT 12 News.
I don't know that I've ever really had a conversation with my kids about this. My youngest is 13. My oldest is 18. I got one in the middle at 16. And you know, they watch the news quite often. I mean, all the time they watch the news. They're very, very well schooled on current affairs and what's going on around the world. But they know me from, you know, all the years and what I talk about when I come home, and you know, they ask me questions about the things that they see on the news, police related. And when we go out, to wherever it may be, I'm always cautious. I mean, you talk to any cop who's been doing that for a while and who's been in the business for a while, and you know, you'll find that they're almost abnormally hyper-vigilant, and that's me. So I'm always aware of, and this is what I tell people, you got to be aware of your surroundings. You got to be looking out all the time, and I just do it out of habit because I know that anything could happen anytime, and then you just can't always prevent those things. Matter of fact, most times you can't. You know, you've got to put that stuff in the parking lot. Otherwise, you would go absolutely crazy if you internalized it. From the most heinous crime to the most heinous active shooting event, you've got to put it in the parking lot, or it'll eat you up. And I don't know what that does to you later. I guess I'll find out, but for now, it seems to work. You know, what I try to do, this is just my personality, you know, I'm not a very talkative person or outgoing person when I'm out of uniform. I tend to be somewhat of an introvert, I guess, when it comes to off-duty time. You know, I go to the gym, I go to the market, I go to the mall, and you know, I go to church, and that's about it. And I go home. But again, the thing that you have to make sure that you do when you're out, this is my recommendation, is that you've got to be aware. You know, you're not going to pick up everything, but you can certainly pick up signals that are that seem to be abnormal. Things don't quite make sense. For example, it's 90 degrees out and you got a guy with a long coat on. Something wrong with that picture, and it doesn't always mean that they're hiding a gun or something underneath, but you got to at least give it a second look, and maybe pay a little more attention to it. And there are other things that are a lot more subtle than that most people wouldn't pick up on. I mean, I'm always scanning people just to see what they might be holding, carrying, that sort of thing. But most people don't think about that. Most people just go about their daily business and don't pay attention to that. I would never, ever tell my family not to go out, keep my family home, try to keep them locked up in a pumpkin shell or something, however that nursery rhyme goes. But you've got to go out and live your life. You've got to do what you're going to do. These types of terroristic incidents can happen anytime, anywhere, but the chances of them happening are slim. And they're difficult for the police to prevent, if not impossible to prevent, unless we have information that something is brewing in that regard. We have intelligence, we have information from whatever source it may come from. That's how we know that it may be coming our way. But if we don't have that intel, it's pretty much impossible to prevent.
Satan wounds those who fight him the most. Satan wounds those that he is worried about the most. And by him coming in and causing such scarring as he did last week, that means he was scared to death of what was taking place in Wilson County. Look at your brothers and sisters in Christ that laid down their life for what they believed in where they thought they could have R&R. The enemy attacked from behind. But that's okay, because my God saw everything there, and I serve a captain, a general, a God who's going to make sure that there will be consequences to those actions. Amen. We have the freedom to take that building that was attacked, transform it through the love of God into a memorial to remind everyone so that people never forget. And if anybody knows me, what is my verse? Love never fails. It will not. And that is why that building later on today will be open to the public. This is something that I haven't seen done in other catastrophes. But guys, I want the world to know that building will be open so that everyone who walks in there will know that the people who died lived for their Lord and Savior, would want them to live for the same as well.
Exactly 1 week after the violence, a peaceful scene. The pews and carpeting replaced, the interior painted white. Red roses propped on chairs symbolizing each of the 26 victims. Church members will decide if this memorial will stay. If members eventually decide to tear that building down, there will likely be some other tribute to their friends and family who were taken on that Sunday morning. Some who had never stepped foot in that church are hoping to help First Baptist moving forward. More than $1 million has been raised by a San Antonio businessman. That's about half of what Brad Belden is hoping to bring into a nonprofit group. The goal, building a new facility and park. He has the blessing of the church pastoral staff.
He looked at us like we had three heads. He said, "You're going to go out and raise $2.5 million to build a church." I said, "Yes, sir. That's what we're going to do. We're going to give them the facility, the church, for hope for them. Nobody will ever be forgotten. The 26 victims will never be forgotten."
That's not the only officially sanctioned fundraiser. You can donate directly to the church on its website, ssfb.net, or you can choose from the verified GoFundMe links that are listed there. This murderous rampage at a quaint, quiet church sparked a whole new level of unease for some, even prompting some churchgoers to question their own Sunday morning routines or feel shaky in their faith. Local pastors saw it firsthand. Myra Arthur spoke to church leaders about how they counseled their congregations and how the Sutherland Springs tragedy prompted them to tackle topics they never had to consider before.
From churches like the Sutherland Springs First Baptist Church, a traditional small-town setting where the community, one more like family, gathers to worship, to mega churches like Community Bible Church off of Loop 1604 in San Antonio, size did not matter. What happened in Sutherland Springs rocked congregations across the country. Out of that tragedy came this gathering.
So we link arms together, unite hands together.
Faith leaders across South Texas coming together, meeting with local law enforcement to discuss security and other challenges they now face in the wake of Sutherland Springs.
You know, it's sometimes difficult. People tend to pull away. We've had a few people just feel like they didn't want to be in public, period. It's happened at churches, it's happened at Walmart, it's happened at schools.
I still believe in the protection of God, but at the same time we got to do what we can and use common sense. We didn't check our minds when we became Christians. We still use our common sense and use whatever we can to protect our people.
We love you, we bless you, we just release.
Zach Cherian is the lead pastor of Brazen Grace Fellowship Church. They meet in a non-traditional setting here at Harris Middle School on the northeast side. Like so many pastors, Cherian shared a message that was tailored to the tragedy in the days after the shooting.
Just fear not. Don't let the enemy put fear in our hearts. You know, there is a real enemy, there is a real devil, we believe, as people of faith, and his main weapon is fear, and he uses situations like this to steal our hope.
The Sutherland Springs shooting also forced pastors like Lee Petty of Bethel International Christian Fellowship to think of things they once never could have imagined.
We as pastors, we can't be carrying guns, at least this is my own opinion. I can't carry a gun and still preach the gospel with power. Either I'm going to lead the flock by example, or I'm going to carry a gun and use it to protect myself. My job is to protect the gospel.
New concerns forever linked to the mass shooting. But above all else, for many church leaders in the tragedy's aftermath, their faith remained steadfast, even reinforced.
I've read the end of the book. We win. And therefore, if we know we win in the end, then why do we live in defeat today?
Myra Arthur, KSAT 12 News.
Since the attack in Sutherland Springs, the website massshootingtracker.org reports nearly 50 mass shootings in the country. Those are acts of violence in which 4 or more people are shot. We want to end this special the way we started it, remembering those who lost their lives while attending church service. We remember them. Tonight, we honor them.
From the very beginning, we felt like people were taking this as part of their family, part of their country was attacked, part of their church was attacked. And we've just seen an outpouring from all over the country of people that have taken this very personal.
I always remember just her being so happy all the time, always bouncing off the walls, and just always amazing, made everyone smile.
It seems like all I do is cry lots of days because I still miss joining the girls. And I'm sure that'll be a long time before I get over that.
Ryland has come as far as he has because of the power of prayer. He was shot 5 times, the arm, the leg, 2 in the stomach, 1 through the scrotum. Ryland would not be here if she hadn't laid on top of him. You know, she was a really special person.
They still haven't told him yet that his mom and sisters are dead. But I said, I'm sure he's getting some kind of idea because he's 5 and everybody else has been up there to see him and they haven't been there.
We wanted to take time to give thanks to anyone and everyone that has been there for us, or been there for Ryland.
This was our church too. I actually proposed to my wife in this church too. So this church means a lot to us, and my heart goes out to all the families, you know, I mean, to the whole community. I knew a couple of them people, you know what I mean, Miss Lou Smith, I knew her real good from the pantry, and it's just hard to not see them anymore.
I know Annabelle loved the roses and the rose color and the purple. I don't have the words for my loss for her. A loss for everyone.
We are not going to let evil interrupt our faith. We will not bow down to it.
I know every single name. I know everyone who gave their life that day. some of which were my best friends. One, my daughter. And I guarantee you, beyond any shadow of a doubt, they are dancing with Jesus today, and they would tell you where they are, keep on fighting. Keep on fighting.
While many converged on the tiny church in the days after the shooting, others showed their support online. The First Baptist Church of Sutherland Springs Facebook page filled with support then and even now. And as Courtney Friedman shows us, the church is happy to receive your kind words.
This message posted on the church's Facebook page December 28th. Some days I almost want to give in and give up, but then I'll see a simple praying for you or stand strong Sutherland Springs or Merry Christmas from Australia. And God allows that simple act of kindness to act as the kindling to my wavering faith. I've heard from most of the family since Christmas, and though it was and still is tough, we all made it through. Some of us were forced into making new traditions for the sakes of those left behind. Some of us cried through the smiles. All of us thought of the memories. But we also saw the joy in a little child we couldn't possibly not smile back at. Saw the glimmer of hope in a quick glance at the beautiful tree. Saw our loved ones in a brand new perspective and learned to slow down and enjoy the moments. We will never be the same, but we will forever be Sutherland Springs strong because of your continued prayers, thoughts, hugs, and kindness.
The rest of the page includes updates on recovery, hope, and signs that the congregation's faith is still strong. Courtney Friedman, KSAT 12 News.
They are Sutherland Springs strong. Taken by an act of violence, but for many, the memories of the small town and its congregation center around their acts of love before and after that shooting. We end tonight with our own Sarah Spivey singing a song of grace for those gone too soon. For all of us at KSAT 12, good night.